Hi, I am Alex Garcia. I am the Chief Program Officer for World Central Kitchen, and I oversee our resilience programming.
Yeah. So Alex, how is the work that you do and that World Central Kitchen does a climate solution?
Well, we have two sides of the house, and our relief work, I would say, is more of a responsive answer to climate change. We are helping communities that are suffering from the impacts and trying to help them respond in a way that they are well fed and safe while they are suffering oftentimes through crises such as increased hurricanes and wildfires.
Yeah.
The other side of the house, the one that I run, Resilience, we run programs that hopefully in the long term will help mitigate climate change. So that may be through our clean cooking work, which is happening in Guatemala and Haiti, as well as through our food producer network, which works with farmers, fishers, and food producers in Puerto Rico, the Caribbean, and also in Guatemala.
How did you end up doing this work, and what motivates you to do the work that you do?
So I've been in the nonprofit sort of international development world for 20 plus years. And I really saw a close impact, starting to see more and more impact from climate change on the communities that we were working on, particularly in Nicaragua, which was an effort that I was working with about 10 years ago, and wanted to really start addressing that, and did my master's and really kind of honed in on clean cooking as something that I was passionate about, but I saw a direct linkage not only between women's livelihoods and women's health, but also climate change. So that's kind of how I got into this work personally.
Sometimes people aren't motivated by a solution like clean cook stoves or clean cooking, but when you really get into the human aspects of that, that's really where it resonates. And for me, I'll say I first learned about clean cooking from Chef Jose Andres,
Mhm.
in a class that I took in 2014 called World on a Plate. But from your perspective, like, could you tell me more about clean cooking and just like what's the problem that is currently being faced?
I truly am passionate about this, and I think it's because it impacts so many people. So, 3 billion people on the planet currently get their main meal every day cooked on what we call a solid fuel stove. So that may be a three-stone fire or
Hmm.
some kind of unit, but it is burning wood, charcoal, dung, or a number of other fuels. And the problem with this is not only are they cutting down forests for the charcoal and the wood? Not only is it takes a tremendous amount of time, but it's also incredibly unhealthy for the women and the families. So
Right.
imagine camping. It's fun for 3 days to cook on a campfire, but you wouldn't want to do it every day of your life. It's,
No.
you get the burns, your eyes hurt, it's smoky, you want to move with the wind. And this is what women endure. So if we can convert women and families and households to better cooking solutions that are burning fuel cleanly, we can really impact not only the planet through reduced CO2 emissions, through decreasing deforestation, but we can also really impact their livelihoods and give them time to spend with their families, maybe starting businesses, being entrepreneurs, finding jobs, because they don't have to spend so much time cooking and getting sick from it.
When I traditionally have thought about clean cook stoves or clean cooking, I've thought about the health aspects and the negative aspects, but you mentioned this broader world of opportunity that comes with clean cooking. I would love if you could talk more about just some of the impacts you've already seen with some of those shifts.
In our
Hmm.
case with World Central Kitchen, because our chefs and our work on the relief side and where our team comes from generally tends to be in institutional settings. So we take the approach that we convert schools or other community kitchens in countries that still heavily use wood or charcoal.
Hmm.
So we're impacting directly the lives of the mothers and women who are cooking the lunch in these schools, because many times in these countries, it's actually volunteer mothers that are cooking the meals. And our goal is to influence adoption, basically showing in the community the impact in the schools.
Could you tell me more about even the process of getting the schools to do this? Are there any hesitations to shift?
Many times, these are forms of cooking that have come down through generations. So there's sort of a
Right.
cultural behavioral change aspect that you need to sort of get people through. And we do that through education and training. And it's about educating them about how to properly maintain them, how to transport them, how to store them. I have yet to see a story or a situation where the mothers and women, and sometimes men who are cooking with the new systems say, "Oh, I really want to go back to cooking with the charcoal or the wood." They see the benefits immediately. They aren't covered in soot. Their walls
Right.
stay whiter and cleaner. So the impact is immediate, but it is a behavior change, especially at the household level. And that's where we are spending a lot of time right now, is developing materials to educate and give women the opportunity and households the opportunity to practice or to learn how to use it in a group setting, finding influential community leaders who can really sort of encourage their neighbors, their aunts, their sisters, their mothers to adopt better cooking. And then finally, the last piece is financial. So a cooking set, a stove, the initial tank, all that is about $150 to get a decent level. If you include also a pressure cooker, which reduces the amount of time that they need to cook. Because in many of these communities, they're cooking with beans and sort of items that require an extensive cooking time. So there's a financial component to this, and how do we sort of try to figure out models of effective micro consumer finance that will help them sort of buy the first kit so that they can get it and start using it in their homes. And in the long run, it will actually save them money, but there's sort of that hurdle of I put it similarly to kind of converting from a fuel car to a hybrid car or an electric car.
Right.
Like, you have to be willing to pay that differential in price to get to those savings and to that impact.
Right.
So it's a challenge for these families that are living on they're very low income families, generally speaking. So we're working on that as well.
A lot of people who watch this will never have experienced, well, they will have experienced clean cooking, but they'll never have experienced what it's like to have, cooking in a way that's not as healthy for them, or, these other challenges that you've pointed out. So what do you say to people, or what does World Central Kitchen say to people to get them to care and lean in and understand, even if this isn't an issue that's right in front of them?
Right. Really, the example that I gave before, I think, is the most tangible that people can really see. Like, going camping for a week is fun, but imagine if you had that fire in your house,
Right.
with very poor ventilation, and you were cooking and you were inhaling this smoke, every time you cook a meal. Imagine only wanting to really cook one meal a day, because it takes so long and it's so hard that your children may have maybe a small something early in the day that isn't cooked, and then one main meal a day. So one of the things we also see is that when people move to improved cooking, the diet and the feeding cycle actually improves in the family, because cooking is so much easier for the head of household who's doing it. But it's very hard to understand if you've never seen it firsthand, just how oppressive and time consuming it is to cook this way. And then when you consider sort of the climate impact of cooking with solid fuels, it's sort of, why isn't everyone paying attention to this? And that's one of the things that we are really trying to do, is make just people aware that this is a real issue everywhere around the world.
As you create that awareness more broadly, as you do this interview, and as we have this conversation, there are obviously going to be some people who start to think, what can I do to help? How do I do something about clean cook stoves, or ensure that there are clean cook stoves and clean cooking more broadly? Like, what would you say to those people? How could they be part of the solution?
Well, I think as with so many things, number one, get educated, right? Learn about it, understand it. If you can, try to visit a country where this is a norm
Yeah.
and see and sort of really experience it. But but support policies and international development policies that will help sort of address these issues at a global scale. Of course, find organizations that are kind of working in the sector and see if, either from the private side, you can, I don't know, invest in them or support nonprofits that are working in that space. It is one of these things where, again, because um, in the developed world or in the Western world,
Right.
however you sort of want to define that term, it's really not prevalent. So you becoming aware of it is either going somewhere where it is, or really kind of doing some research and trying to get educated that way.
Undoubtedly, there are people who really want to get even more hands-on and more engaged, not just with clean cooking, but with maybe with some of the other types of work that Central Kitchen's doing that are climate solutions, or just more broadly, there are people who will hear what you're saying and want to do something about climate solutions and
Mhm.
implement those. So, do you have any advice more broadly for people?
Oh, from a career standpoint, God, there's so many. What I think is really exciting about this sector is that there's so many ways to come in, right? You can come in sort of from the science angle. You can come in from the finance angle. You can come in from the social services angle. So I think whatever sort of is the passion professionally that drives you, it's looking at the organizations that are working in this area and finding that niche that fits your passion, be it accounting or nerding out on systems analysis of smoke inhalation that happens in the household. Like, the gamut is so wide. But again, do research and support. Align yourself with organizations that are really trying to look at innovative ways of tackling these problems. Specifically with Rural Central Kitchen, the work that I say is more closely aligned with climate change impact and sort of mitigation of that is actually our food producer network, where we do take volunteers to go work on farms and support eco-agrological farms that are addressing climate change sort of from the agricultural perspective. That I think is a whole other conversation, but it is something that we offer as an opportunity. And I encourage people to, if they are interested in doing that in Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, the U.S. Virgin Islands, or Guatemala, they can go on our website and learn about that as well.
Yeah, and one last question I'll ask you. Is there anything that you just wish that a general audience, that people would know?
So I think the one thing for me always that I try to communicate, and again, this goes back to the clean cooking. We get lots of suggestions about, sort of alternatives and things. And my feeling is we cannot impose solutions on women and communities in developing world that we aren't willing to adopt ourselves. So we can't have this double standard. So we have to be open to all solutions, but they have to be solutions that are not just for some people. They have to be universally accepted and understood and and fair. So that is sort of how we look at the solutions that we are trying to promote and to push forward. Is that we would be willing to take these practices on in our own home and in our own lives, and therefore, we can stand with some conviction around these solutions for others.
Thank you you so much, Alex, for that conversation and for just sharing your perspective, sharing more, and really educating me and others about the importance of clean cooking and improved clean cook stoves. If there's one thing that I walk away from that conversation, and even thinking of the conversation with Leah previously as well, it's that, you know, these solutions, whether it's reducing food waste, improving clean cook stoves, are not only important for reducing emissions in the atmosphere, as important as they are, but they're important to supporting people's lives, to supporting people's health, to supporting their wellness, and ensuring that they could have the best quality of life. That lines up with the work that we do at Project Drawdown to ensure that we're reaching drawdown as quickly, but also as safely and as equitably as possible. And Alex's work is a great example of that. But next, I'm talking with Tony Lee about yet another climate solution and about his perspective as someone who wasn't thinking about climate solutions so long ago, but over time has realized that his job too can be a climate job.